Tonight, tickets, tears and tantrums.
Give me that paper, okay? Because I was talking to you in the first place.
It's really
That's right.
The winners and losers in Britain's parking wars.
The total bill I paid in the end was £582.40. The punishment is totally disproportionate to the crime, considering I didn't even commit a crime in the first place.
How drivers are using the law to fight the law.
I'm seeing this really very strong momentum, this sea change bubbling up of resistance and resentment from the motorists. It's getting very, very, very interesting because the public has had enough.
Good evening. This bank holiday weekend may bring some respite for Britain's motorists, with councils across the land relaxing some of their parking restrictions for a few precious days. But when the holiday is over, the hostilities between wardens and drivers are likely to resume. Last year, we reported on the increasing number of drivers who are using obscure rules and legal loopholes to appeal successfully against their parking fines and clamping fees. And since then, even more have come forward, challenging their local councils and the courts and opening the way for many others to gain refunds. This programme has its own parking rebel in the shape of reporter Jonathan Maitland. Tonight, he reports on the increasingly bitter battle on our streets.
It's business as usual on the Queen's Highway. One car, one ticket, one clamp, and one very angry motorist.
Right, so you just clamped me before the time and I've got to pay it, yeah? At the end of the day, your traffic wardens are going out telling people that they can park there, and then when they do park there, they come around 10 minutes later and clamp them before the time's up. And then you expect me to pay for it.
He's been clamped even though his ticket shows he has 10 minutes of parking time left. The parking attendant says he's broken the rules by feeding the meter or putting more money in after his first ticket expired. But the driver claims another parking attendant told him that he could do it.
Basically, they're saying that I put money in the meter beforehand. It says on the meter 4 hours maximum, right? I put 2 hours in, I come out here and I said to the bloke, am I right to put another couple of quid in, like, to make up the 4 hours? I said, because I didn't have change. He said, oh yeah, you're right till 10 past 11. So I've done that, and now they're saying, oh, I'm feeding the meter.
Scenes like these may be familiar, but things weren't always like this. In fact, stand by for a headline that may surprise you.
One of our cameramen went behind the scenes to see what the Metropolitan Police have up their sleeve. This fine body of 50-year-olds, that's the average age, are the first of the new traffic wardens in training to keep the traffic flowing.
So why have attitudes to this fine body of men and women changed so much? Well, for a start, many of them are no longer attached to the police. 11 years ago, parking offences were decriminalised, with enforcement often passing to local authorities. Soon, the traffic warden became the council parking attendant. What's followed has been a rise in tickets, fines and resentment.
Give me that paper, okay? Because I was talking to you in the first place, okay?
Assaults like this have risen too. But while some drivers get mad, others are taking a different approach. For them, it's all about getting even.
What's very interesting at the moment is I'm seeing this really very strong momentum, this sea change bubbling up of resistance and resentment from the motorist. And you go through the internet and there are loads and loads and loads of anti-parking sites like Ticket Busters. You're getting people who are actually going to take councils to the Court of Human Rights. You're getting councils being taken to the High Court for misapplying tickets. It's getting very, very, very interesting because the public has had enough.
We first reported on this fight back last year. We showed how drivers were boning up on the rules to expose mistakes made by the local authorities running the system. Mistakes that have proved extremely costly.
Yeah, so what we've got here is an absolute classic example of a basic error that Sunderland have committed. Disabled bay, marked in yellow. Legislation.
Marked in yellow. What's
Mark-
the problem with marked in yellow?
Well, legislation states it should be white. Now, we're not nitpicking. The law is the law, and the law must be obeyed. If it's the same for a driver, it must be the same for a local authority.
The errors were often tiny. Parking bays painted the wrong colour, yellow lines that didn't come to a definite end, or even simple paperwork cock-ups. But according to the strict letter of the law, even the smallest mistake in enforcement could make a ticket invalid. As a result, councils have had to refund or drop thousands of pounds worth of fines.
Good evening, if you just joined us, I'm Matt Dickin, this is TalkSport.
The parking rebel who featured in that last programme is now a regular pundit on such topics.
Well, we're talking justice for the motorist. In particular, we're talking about parking tickets and the legality of them.
Neil Heron and fellow rebel Barry Siegel have made hundreds of appeals between them, and they claim a 100% success rate.
You two have got loads of money back for people, haven't you? People have got loads of money back by following your advice.
Oh, tens of thousands of pounds we're into now.
And millions, possibly, because one or two of the cases that are still going on.
The enormity of what could potentially happen in the next 3 to 6 months, I do not think the government has even factored this in any equation.
Today, they're guests on a radio show that regularly devotes a phone-in to parking complaints. It has 3 million listeners and thousands of exasperated callers.
But why have you paid £700 for something you don't know whether you did it or not?
The thing is, Mike, see, people keep saying to me, why did you pay it, right? But my car was clamped, okay? At the other end of my road, there was one of, those trucks that lift cars off the road.
Yeah.
Ready, and he said to me, if I didn't pay the money now, they were going to take it. Now, short of getting into a fight, what else could I have done? Because they were going to take my car away.
Yeah, I would have paid. I have to admit, I would have paid too.
Chief among the callers' complaints is the inflexible attitude shown by many councils. Even when they seem to have strong excuses for parking wrongly, the tickets still rain down.
Can you give me some advice on a parking ticket issued to someone with a disabled badge?
Mm-hmm.
My husband, unfortunately, put the time indicator out in the car, but not the disabled badge, so he got a ticket. We took a photostat copy of the disabled badge and sent a letter of apology. Got a letter back saying, not interested, pay the fine within so many days. I sent another letter saying, look, this wasn't breaking the law, it was a mistake. Would they please see sense? No deal, we had to pay the fine.
I would write to them and say you'd like your £30 back and you want to go take the case to the adjudicator. I would get the local papers involved, local news, everything, because this sort of thing, you are innocent, you made a mistake.
Road rebels like Neil and Barry have collected hundreds of similar examples of what they believe is the pernickety approach that local parking attendants have to work to. Hardly surprising then that they support drivers who are pernickety in return. Drivers like Roger MacArthur. He set a precedent which Barry and Neil believe could make literally millions of parking tickets invalid, even where cars have been illegally parked.
Well, Mr MacArthur is going to be a national hero. He's exposed many local authorities acting in a lawless fashion. And going back to May, when the decision was sent round by NPAS, the National Parking Adjudication Service, it sent shockwaves around local authorities.
The celebrated MacArthur versus Berry ruling was made last year. The driver proved in court that Berry Council were breaking the strict rules on the way tickets should be worded.
Just take me through what was wrong with the ticket then, and I mean just in very simple terms.
Well, all tickets are supposed to have the date of issue on, and that's required by the Road Traffic Act 1991. They're also supposed to state that it's a penalty charge, and the Berry ticket says a sum. And the third point was that the notice to owner that is sent out if the fine isn't paid should go to the registered keeper of the vehicle, and that wasn't clear from the Berry ticket.
Right, for those of you struggling to keep up with Roger, help is at hand. This is how a ticket should be printed, with 2 dates on, the date the ticket was issued and the date of the parking offence. Now usually those 2 dates are the same of course, but for the ticket to stand up in court, the date must appear in both places. Miss one off, as happened in Berry, and the ticket's invalid. And there were 2 other tiny technical errors with the Berry tickets. Instead of saying penalty, they said sum, and they used the word you instead of registered keeper. Just a few small errors for the council, but one giant piece of evidence for the driver.
So you took them on very kind of petty issues like the wording, like they said sum instead of penalty charge and stuff like that?
That's absolutely right, but they book people for parking on very petty reasons as well. For instance, being just slightly over the line in a parking bay, you can get a £60 fine for that. That's petty in itself.
As a result of Roger MacArthur's victory, NPAS, an organisation who hear parking appeals, warned all councils to check the wording of their tickets. And as a result, Sunderland Council has reimbursed 46 fines and are now not pursuing unpaid tickets issued between February 2003 and November 2005. Barry Siegel, meanwhile, has used the ruling to win parking appeals in 3 London boroughs. He has more appeals planned and believes councils may end up having to drop millions of pounds worth of fines.
The implications countrywide are very, very large indeed, because I've been looking at lots and lots of parking tickets from various councils, and nearly every single one would be disqualified under the rules of MacArthur on sometimes more than one reason. And each time I get this information, I notify the council that I believe their parking tickets are invalid, and I notify the appropriate parking adjudicator as well.
The implication of the MacArthur versus Berry case is that actually you might end up, as councils across Britain, having to give motorists refunds totalling, I don't know, millions of pounds.
I can't see any basis for that. And the adjudicator's decision in London says expressly that there's no basis for that.
But shouldn't there be? I mean, you guys are incredibly hot on the detail of the law. You know, if you spend a few seconds too long in the parking bay, bosh, you've got a fine. And here you are quite possibly getting the wording wrong and saying, oh, well, sorry, you can't have your money back. I mean, that's hypocritical, isn't it?
No, it's not. If you don't say at the time, I think there's something wrong with this ticket, for whatever reason, but pay it, you're saying you accept you were parked illegally and therefore should pay the penalty. Why should that then get refunded? That seems to be absurd.
Now, at this point, I should declare a vested interest in this story because I got a parking ticket recently and it made me blow my top. What happened was this. I parked in this bay and I thought this sign governed it. I actually asked the traffic warden if I could park here and he said yes. The sign says, pay here and display tickets. So I paid. I displayed my ticket, which lasted for 2 hours. I came back an hour later and I'd been towed away and it cost me £200 to get my car back. I was fuming. Only later did I discover that this bay was in fact governed by this sign, which I didn't even see, which is a residents only sign. I appealed on the grounds that the signs were confusing, but I was turned down. But now, after hearing how persistence has paid off for others, I've decided to fight on. And I'm not alone. GMTV presenter Fiona Phillips has also turned parking rebel. She's about to appeal after coughing up £600 to bailiffs for refusing to pay a parking fine. Fiona got her ticket on this road. She'd paid to park here, but the attendant said she hadn't displayed her ticket. She thought a quick letter to the council would sort things out, but then came the reply.
I then got a statutory letter from them saying a parking ticket is a legal document. You have to appeal when you get your notice to owner. And in my head I thought, how ridiculous. I've sent them the proof. They're human beings that read these letters, they must be. Why don't they just write to me and say, so you sent the proof, fine, let's stop it now. Which clearly they didn't. And I continued ignoring them and that was pig-headed, but I meant to be pig-headed. I was so annoyed.
The ignoring tactic failed. After numerous warnings to either pay up or appeal, things became more serious.
Next minute I had a letter from the county court saying we've instructed bailiffs to come and either collect money from you or collect some of your possessions. So I phoned the bailiffs up because I was going on holiday actually, and I said, look, don't bother coming while I'm on holiday. And they said, well, we're going to come anyway. They didn't in the end, but they put a letter through my door saying that somehow from owing £125 from a £40 ticket, I then owed them £169.75 for their visit. I don't know how, they must have chartered a private helicopter to get down to my house. And that I now owed £352.75.
So the total bill in the end, which presumably you paid, was?
It was, in fact, because I was out when they put this notice through the door, the total bill I paid in the end was £582.40.
The fine sparked a public war of words, with Fiona describing the council as cretins. They responded by saying that she had ignored their advice and only had herself to blame. They also sent her a photograph, which they say proved their case.
To be fair, the council have produced evidence that even though you'd bought a ticket, it wasn't in your windscreen.
But it was on the dashboard actually, and the pictures are not conclusive. There's a real murky sort of white shadow in the corner of the windscreen. And I've got a black band that goes around sort of my dashboard area, and I place my ticket on the dashboard, I never stick them on. And, you know, but to get to nearly £600 over something that maybe wasn't displayed properly, it's ridiculous, it's completely disproportionate.
Wandsworth Council may have little sympathy for Fiona's argument, but others do. Alex Henney of the London Motorist Action Group did the same thing as me. He parked in a residents-only bay by mistake. He got a ticket and was clamped too, but is now appealing against the cost of the clamp using the Human Rights Act.
I'm prepared to pay the parking ticket for making the mistake. I don't think I should, but that's another matter. But what I object to is being clamped, being inconvenienced, and having to pay another £65.
Now, you're using the Human Rights Act in your appeal.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me about that. Where in the Human Rights Act does it go on about parking offences?
It doesn't, but what comes out of the Human Rights Act is that state authorities should be proportionate and use no more force or fine than is necessary to achieve their objectives.
Yeah, but I just wonder if you're using a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
No, the Chief Parking Adjudicator for England and Wales has said, and I quote, that clamping and towing are draconian measures and that council should be mindful of the Human Rights Act in considering whether to tow and clamp, and they should not do them without good reason.
This is the kind of behaviour that Alex objects to. Our car is parked down a relatively quiet side street. Its pay and display ticket has expired, so rightly it gets a ticket. A minute after ticketing the car, the attendant radios in. Then minutes later the car is clamped. Within 8 minutes the fine's doubled to £115. What do you think of people who use the Human Rights Act to try and get out of parking fines?
Well, it's one of the great British pastimes to get out of parking fines, and people will do it using every other way. And if people want to try and use the Human Rights Act to do this, then let's see what happens. I can't possibly complain about people using whatever form of legislation. People have tried to use the Bill of Rights, 1689 Bill of Rights, but that turned out not to be right.
As for my own legal challenge...
Right, bad news, I'm afraid. I've just appealed against my parking ticket again, and I've just lost again. It got quite heated in there, actually, and my only option now, apparently, is to go for judicial review in the High Court, which could be quite time-consuming and expensive, but I'm going to do it, I think, because I just don't think it's fair to pay that much money for what was an honest mistake.
Now, if I'm ever going to win my case, I'm going to need more evidence. I've been told that if I can prove the parking bay that I was in was wrongly marked, according to government regulations, then I might have a chance.
If you look at the whole parking system, it's massively imbalanced, and it's balanced towards the council, because we have to abide by every tiny piece of minutiae that the council publish about parking. But when it comes to actually maintaining the signs, maintaining the lines on the road, making sure everything is clear and available, they're sloppy, they're hopeless, and they do it badly. You walk round any of the bays in London and you will find 100 transgressions. They're unaccountable. You can't do anything about that. You can send letters, you're completely ignored. But if you transgress one of their tiny little rules, there it is, on the screen, 50 quid.
So, the defence calls Richard Bentley.
You have a parking bay, you think?
Yep.
You haven't. You've got a mismatch between two types of parking bay, and there's no upright plate. In law, that bay doesn't exist at all, because it's not in the book.
Now, you may remember Richard from our last programme. He's a traffic consultant, an ex-policeman, and his idea of bedtime reading is the Traffic Signs and General Directions Manual. This shows in minute detail how road markings should be set out, and if they've been set out wrongly, they're illegal. I showed him where I got my ticket.
So, Richard, have I got a case?
Yes, Johnny, you have. The lines that are present on this should be continuous. This line should be repeated all the way along, and it's just got fresh air. It's
Really?
incorrectly marked.
So, I could be onto a winner?
Yes, you could.
Because there aren't enough of these white stripes, basically?
Yes.
And what about the sign? Because I didn't even see that.
That sign is a 1981 regulation sign. It expired in 1994. To use that sign, which was made in 2002, they have to get permission of the government. And my information is they haven't got it.
Right, so they weren't following their own rules?
Correct.
In fact, it seems many other places in London aren't following the rules. Last week, Richard went on his own road marking tour of the capital.
It's a basic disaster. There's non-compliance with the law throughout the city.
He showed me numerous examples. Among them, a parking bay right outside the very place where our laws are drawn up.
Well, this bay outside the Home Office has a double line at the start and a single line at the end. And that's not permitted in law. If you want to have double lines at the start of a bay, you have to have double lines at the end. If you want a single line at the end of a bay, you've got to have a single line at the start.
So this is just inconsistent?
Totally inconsistent and non-compliant with the law.
So there's no bay like this in the traffic signs Bible?
None whatsoever.
So it doesn't exist in law and it's illegal?
Yes.
Let's say you get a parking ticket in a bay like this,
Yes.
and it's illegal.
Yes.
Would you actually get your money back if you went to the appeal service and said, look, the markings are wrong?
Provided you set out your case and showed them the law, it would be very difficult, in my opinion, for them to argue against case law, statute and the regulations.
But, I mean, do you know of examples where people have gone in and said, you know, look at these markings, look at the traffic signs Bible, the markings are wrong, and they've got their money back?
Yes.
You do?
Yes. People have come to me for advice. I've given advice, they've gone away, they've written into the local authority, challenged the ticket, they've got the money back.
On a tour of 22 London streets, Richard Bentley found badly marked bays in every one. He found nearly 100 bays which he believes we could all use for free, simply because they break the rules.
Were you surprised at how many kind of mistakes he found?
I thought it was outrageous. This is the capital city of the country. It's where the government sit, it's where the Department for Transport reside, and it's where the ministers and the Secretary of State that decide the format of bays work within a mile of this area, and yet the local authorities have chosen or failed to comply with basic law.
I suppose some people will say, I mean, the local authorities will say, look, you're nitpicking. It's pretty obvious that you can park there, you can't park there. I mean, you know, you should get the gist generally from the signs.
Unfortunately, that's not what the law says. The High Courts have ruled, and the laws of the land have ruled, that signs and bays have to be pedantically exactly right. They are letting everybody down, not me pointing out the problems.
If the signs and lines are wrong, then the regulation is not enforceable. But again, it needs somebody to say the signs and lines are wrong.
If our expert is right, and it looks like he might be, that could be bad news for you guys, because that means that a huge percentage of parking tickets that are issued in London are invalid. Because you might get snowed under now, you know.
The whole point
With
is to
people
make it
asking
as
for
easy
refunds.
as possible. If people have paid the money, I don't think there's a case for a refund. But if people want to challenge a parking ticket that is there and hasn't been paid, then each case should be considered and people should be come forward.
Right, back to my own case. Having had 2 appeals turned down, I'm now seeking a judicial review to get my case heard in the High Court.
Right, bad news, I'm afraid. In the case of Maitland versus Parking Appeals Service, permission to apply for judicial review is hereby refused, which is really annoying, and that should be the end of the line, I suppose. But having spoken to Richard Bentley, I realised that I do have one last weapon in my armoury, and I intend to use it. It's this.
Meanwhile, what about Alex Hennie's appeal? He, remember, claimed that his clamping release fee was disproportionate to the offence and so breached his human rights.
We had an hour-and-a-half hearing. We covered many issues. At the end, the adjudicator adjourned it because he'd got to consider a number of matters. So we'll continue.
As for me, things have taken a new turn. Thanks to my new information about the parking bay markings, the court is now reconsidering its decision to throw out my case.
Jonathan Maitland with that report. And that's nearly all we have time for this evening. Coming up next Tuesday night, soccer hooligan or innocent abroad. Teenager Michael Shields was arrested following Liverpool's European Cup final victory last May and is now serving 15 years in a Bulgarian jail for attempted murder. It's a crime he and his family insist he didn't commit. And in a fresh investigation carried out by one of Britain's most respected detectives, we have found evidence that casts new doubt on the safety of his conviction.
The identification process was a farce. The non-collection of available evidence was a farce. The court proceedings were a farce. The whole thing is a mockery of justice.
And you can see the results of that investigation in a special edition of Tonight next Tuesday at 9:45. Until then, from all of us here, goodbye and thank you for joining us.
Well, coming next tonight, he's in trouble again, but the murder of a widow gives Jack a second chance to prove himself. David Jason in A Touch of Frost next here. Whilst over on ITV2 now, the final 8 battle it out in American Idol.